So just let me know if you can hear me. If you can't, if you haven't got audio, then just just use the chat box. Hi, I've got Freddie the Great. Who's that?
Oh, it's actually Andrea, and my son has nicely named.
Hi, Andrea. How are you? It's Elaine.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Hi, Andrea. Hi, Elaine.
Hi.
I'm going to give it about 2 minutes, and then I'm going to start. I think that's Sue from America. Sue Hennings. Hi, Sue.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Thank you. We've also got Oriana joining us from, I'm not sure where, but where are you, Oriana?
I'm in Mexico City.
Okay, cool. Welcome.
Thank you.
Just before I start, I want to remind you that we're recording. It's recording now, so just be careful what you share, because obviously we're going to share this recording with others who've booked but can't attend. So just be mindful when you're sharing information or asking a question. So in the chat box, I've actually written a request, just an introduction request, really. I'm hoping that all of you are safe and all of you are well, and that somehow you're coping through these challenging times. But it's an interactive session, so I invite you to turn your cameras on, your microphones on, and make sure that you can all hear and see me. Is that a thumbs up from everyone?
Cool. Yeah, come on then.
Okay, so look, just a reminder then that we're recording from now. So if you can just share very briefly a little bit about yourself, I'll kick that off in a second. By the way, in terms of timing, 30 minutes is going to go really quick. There's a fair bit of content that I want to get through, so I'm just going to ask you to be respectful of that. Forgive any interruptions that I might make from time to time, just to keep it on track. If you have got a more in-depth inquiry and you want to take that offline, more than happy to engage with you after this. Okay, now this recording will be available on YouTube, on the YouTube channel. That's a private channel for us, and you'll easily be able to access it from either the same booking page, but also I'll ensure that everyone who's booked gets a copy of the link to the YouTube video, but also a copy of the slide deck I'm using. So, welcome all. I'm going to just shift to the next slide. Let's just bring me up. That's me. You can see me. Just a little bit of background about myself. So, I'm Colin Newbold. I head up the TLC online organization, of which Click 360 is our flagship brand of 360-degree feedback. I think most of you know me anyway. I've been involved in the 360 world since the 1990s, and I've seen a lot of different questionnaires in that time. Some good, some not so good. So if you would just introduce yourselves, you'll see I've invited you in the chat panel to say who you are, where you're located, the organization that you work for, and specifically what you want to take away from this session. So let me invite you one by one. Can I start with Andrea?
Yeah, sure. Do you want me to write it or just speak?
No, just talk it through. Yeah, please.
Right, okay. Yeah, so I'm Andrea, not Freddie the Great. I have now changed my name on the screen. I'm from Oldham Council in the northwest of England, and we are a borough council. And Elaine, who's on the call as well, who is one of my colleagues, doesn't work for Oldham Council, and she'll introduce herself, but we work across a system of different partnerships across health, and we're also looking at linking in with police, housing, anyone who contributes to Oldham residents. And what we are looking at is a new approach to appraisal reviews, and 360 is just one of those approaches that we're currently exploring, that we need something that will work across the system. But the reason that we are exploring 360 is because we want to move away from the traditional view that, performance is what a manager sees, because obviously it isn't, and there's a lot more that goes into an output than just whether someone's achieved the objective or not. We want to look at the full journey. So that's why we're exploring 360s, and we've registered, or I've registered at least, for all of the upcoming webinars, because I think, you know, it'd be interesting to see how different organisations approach it, how things have taken shape over the years since I last did anything to do with 360s.
Okay, Andrea, thank you. What specifically do you want to get out of the session on questionnaire design?
Well, I've never been responsible for designing a questionnaire before. I don't know if I would be responsible for designing it once we get past the initial kind of sign-off stage, if we do go down the line of 360s. But certainly, I think it'd help to have the knowledge of what's good, what's, you know, what you should avoid, what gets the most out of people. And I think, you know, completion rates are always an issue, aren't they, when you look at surveys? So how do you get the most you know, out of it in terms of getting people to complete it, so it's not a laborious task.
Okay, cool. Well, we're going to cover all of that. I also want to flag up, I'll do it at the end as well, but the next session on awareness briefing probably has more relevance to getting really good completion rates, getting people to finish on time. So you'll register for that anyway, so that's good. But yeah, we'll cover those points around questionnaire design. Oriana, can I invite you to just share briefly who you are?
Yes, absolutely. Oriana Tikel. At the moment, I'm in Mexico City. Usually I commute between Mexico and the UK. I'm an executive coach, and I head up the Science of Happiness at Work at the Eye Opener Institute in the UK and their coaching programs. And we're revamping our questionnaire around the science of happiness at work. And we also have a 360 that goes with it, which is actually one of my favorite tools for using with executive clients, because it's about how much well-being do our clients create in the people around them. So it's about their leadership style. And with the changing, because of the analysis of the data of the data we've been collecting for the last 10 years, we're also going to have to change the 360. So that's why I was interested in coming and listening in.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. Let's ask, if I may, Sue from America, I think.
That's right. Yes. My name is Sue Hennings, and I live and work out of Brunswick, Maine, in the U.S., although I work for a Boston-based company called MFS Investment Management. And I've been working with 360s for a number of years, although we recently changed our 360 tool and have been working with Colin to create a customized 360 for our organization to match our competency model. We have not rolled it out yet. I've just been through the accreditation process, and as one of my colleagues as well. And we were intending to pilot it this month, but we've had some delays due to the situation going on. It's obviously very crazy in the financial services industry right now. The market's crazy. So one of the reasons why I wanted to participate in these sessions was more for a refresher for me and to keep my head into it, because I'm not sure, when we're going to be launching it. And so for me, it's just, I thought it was great to have these 30-minute kind of quick refreshers over time, just to keep me engaged. And for this particular with questionnaire design, I think that this is particularly going to be a nice refresher. And then also as I look at other utilizations for survey design outside of the 360, I think, I'll be able to pick up some tips that I can utilize in other aspects of my work.
Okay, thank you, Sue.
Colin, I can't see the screen of questions, but hopefully that covered it.
Okay, can you see the main screen with my slide?
I can see the main screen. Yeah, I just haven't found the chat here.
Chat box. It's in the control panel at the bottom, but don't worry, you've answered the question. Okay. Thank you. Welcome aboard. So this session, it's been billed as a group mentoring session, and it's designed to be informative, maybe instructional, I hope so. Most of all, though, I want it to be enjoyable. So how I want to work with you guys is to deliver short bursts of info, probably accompanied by one or more slides, and then just open up the floor for any questions or observations or suggestions from you guys. And at any time you can write into the chat box, because I'll be picking that up from time to time. But we're an intimate group, so I encourage you to actually use your microphone. So let's move to my first opening slide. This is really a basic starter about 360. I want to make the point before we go any further. Let me be absolutely clear about this. 360 degree feedback, it's not a psychometric test. I don't think that'll surprise any of you, but I have even received tenders where it's been described as a psychometric test. The questionnaire that is used, therefore, doesn't have to go through the same level of scrutiny as a psychometric test would. Face validity is usually enough. In other words, the questionnaire looks like it would illustrate good leadership or management capability or whatever it is that you're measuring. And anyone who was generally regarded as a good leader or as a good manager would likely score highly. So it's not a psychometric. If it isn't, what is it? Well, it's probably best described as an opinion poll, or maybe as a perceptions survey. The individual participant's self-perception compared to the perceptions of their rater colleagues. And where do the questions come from? Well, generally speaking, they are drawn from typical competencies attributed to good leadership or management capability. And then sometimes, they're perhaps combined with, woven together with the organization's values. So it's often a combination of those things. But in either case, the question should be about the participant's behavior, something that is specific and observable, hence the SOB term. Let me unpick SOBs in a bit more detail. This next slide offers a definition of the SOB acronym. Now, I don't normally just read what's on a slide. I normally try and add a bit of value. I've always thought that's a bit demeaning or even distracting. The presenter's job, in my opinion, should always be to add value to what's written on the slide. But in this case, I am going to read those words out loud. That way you'll know this is a really important definition. SOB, specific observable behavior, okay? Something the person, i.e. the participant, that's the person getting the report at the end, something they're doing or not doing, and or something they are saying or not saying. And in fact, that's a pretty good definition for the word behavior. I often ask that question, what does the word behavior mean to you? That, to me, is the best definition I've come across. And it, I think, illustrates what we're talking about with a specific observable behavior, an SOB. This is probably a good place to pause for comment about the first two slides. Any questions, suggestions, or observations?
Have you ever seen this work with organisations who haven't got competency frameworks?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of organizations just take one of our standard questionnaires. We offer a range, and they'll know that those questionnaires have face validity. They've been properly researched, and embody, if you like, all of the characteristics I'm going to go through in a minute. But I absolutely do work with a lot of organizations that haven't done that. In fact, some organizations actually ask us to help them design the competency framework and the values framework before we even get into the 360. And that questionnaire then is drawn from that language.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. By all means, interrupt me at any point. Okay, don't just wait for me to wait for me to pause for breath. I do that occasionally, but just jump in when you're ready. Okay. So this one's all about basic characteristics, basic objectives or goals, rules, if you like, about questionnaire design. Number one, start with the end in mind. Know what you want to measure. Is it leadership or management capability? That is the norm, but there are others like emotional intelligence, coaching capability, selling capability. For example, my company is soon to start revalidating NHS doctors on their ability to interact with patients and colleagues. It's part of the contract they have with the NHS. Right now, that's on hold, as you can imagine. But there's many different ways in which 360 questionnaires can be used. But think also about the structure of the questionnaire, because this is going to have an impact on the time it takes to complete. Most popular structure is a small number of cluster headings, which could be a value or a competency, followed by a short definition and then a number of relevant questions that sit underneath the heading. Let me show an example. This one actually comes from our EIQ, our Emotional Intelligence Questionnaire. And now I'm going to go into more detail about what makes a good question.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah, Ariana, sure.
Before we move ahead, please. Because I'm seeing things here that when I'm teaching people and they're building questionnaires, I'm seeing that there's, in the first one, if someone is authentic and building trust easily, is that all in one question? Because the two things they don't necessarily have the same answer, because someone could be authentic but doesn't build trust, or vice versa.
It's a really good question. I thank you for asking it, Oriana. One of the points I want to make about good questionnaire design is that you try and ask only one thing at a time. You'll see that's coming up. Having said that, some of the words that we use have different meanings to people. So it can be helpful to put a clarification in, as in this case. But you're right, it's not the only thing that builds authenticity, or it's not the only thing that constitutes authenticity, but it is one way.
Yeah. Somebody could be an authentic, going back to your last slide, SOB, but a different kind of SOB, which would mean that they didn't build trust easily. That's what came up in my mind.
In that case, I'm guessing the score would be low because they're not building trust. But yeah. I also would point out that in the awareness briefing that we're going to cover next week, we do talk about how do people answer these questions where there might be something like this. And we always say, you answer the question on what you believe is how you interpret it, but use the comment box that follows, and I'll come into that in a second, to actually clarify your meaning and your scoring.
Thanks.
But in general, we would avoid asking more than one thing at a time. In fact, if we go back to the slide we were on, this is all about keeping the questions really simple. So, for example, use positive questions. This is number 3. Things you want people to move towards. And present tense where you can. Think about the context, both in terms of how the question is framed. Usually the participant name is at the top, or if it's a self-questionnaire, then the word like yourself or myself. And then also think about the context in relation to the answer set or the Likert scale or the rating scale, because every question has to sit right in both contexts. Use action verbs, in other words, verbs that end with ing. Because in our experience, and we've been doing this since 1997, I think, are shown, those words are shown to be more effective in engaging the rater. Number 5, think about inviting free text comments and how they're going to be labeled. So in our experience, every question being followed by a box like, an explanation box or a free text box, it's way too often. Given that you might be looking at maybe 50, 60, 70 questions. After every cluster seems okay. Some clients prefer just one set of questions right at the end, one set of open questions right at the end. But if you are going to use comment boxes after each cluster, you need to think very carefully about the invitation words that you put across the top of each. We use the words what, and then the participant name, does well. And then the second box underneath that is what the participant name again could do differently. Now, our next session on awareness briefings, we'll go into that in a bit more depth, but I suggest right now it's important to explain in the awareness briefing how you use each box, how a person uses each box. because you're inviting raters to add clarity and depth to their scoring, and they should be written wherever possible as SOBs. In other words, the comments are something that the participant's doing or not doing, or something they're saying or not saying. Number 6, a really good set of questions to end with is what you want the participant to stop doing, start doing, or continue doing. We see that in most of our questionnaires. Sorry, let me come back. Okay, so let's just take a look at the rating scale, otherwise known as an answer set or a Likert scale. I've heard it pronounced Likert scale. I don't actually know what the correct pronunciation is. Maybe one of you can guide me on that. But I think an easy way of answering it is just to say it's a rating scale. But as mentioned in 3 above, you need to ensure that the question is written in context with that rating scale. So let me show you what we mean by rating scales. We are talking here about the commonly most popular Likert scales for a 360. I welcome your feedback on that, but also on the optimal number of points on the scale. What do you all think?
It's a debate that comes up all the time with people. That do you want to have the neutral place in the middle, which is neither one thing nor the other, or do you want to push people into being on the agreeing side or on the disagreeing side?
Yeah, I like 1 to 4.
Okay. 4 means you're pretty much forced to one side or the other.
Yeah, definitely.
And you're right that wherever you have a midpoint in an odd numbered set, you're going to get a lot of people congregating around that midpoint. In terms of number of points, I think 7 could be a little bit too much, but what you have to remember is that our tool is quite unique in the sense that it actually offers a 100-point scale, because it's a sliding scale. So you can actually move your cursor right along and score whatever you like, anywhere between 0 and 100. Having said that, our rating scale, of course, is also populated with the Likert scale headings underneath. So it kind of it's divided up so that you can see which of the 4, 5, 6 points that you're referring to. Any other suggestions, observations on Likert scales, rating scales? Okay, let me talk about things to avoid. Kind of the opposite, really, of good practice. But wherever possible, you should avoid asking more than one thing at a time. We've covered that. Otherwise, obviously, the rater is confused about how to answer. Avoid ambiguity for obvious reasons. It may not be ambiguous to the designer of the question, but when it's shown to a number of colleagues and they don't understand it, it is ambiguous. So it's worth getting a number of people to proofread a questionnaire before you launch it. Avoid jargon unless it's absolutely relevant, especially if you're inviting people that have less understanding of your world, like customers, for example, or suppliers, if that's relevant. In terms of negative statements, as I said before, try to ensure your questions lead people towards what you want rather than away from what you don't want. So, for example, remains calm under pressure is always better than loses it under pressure. And double negatives are rare, but I'll share an example I saw once in a moment. So let's take the next slide. This is a bit idealistic, and I'm absolutely putting my head above the parapet here in order to be potentially shot down even. But it's not a bad rule of thumb to keep in mind, because 7 clusters or competencies or behaviors, in other words, the headings, is even too many in my experience. 4 or 5 is actually better. But the point is that even 7 clusters times 7 questions in each cluster is still less than 50 questions overall. And in the early days when we started this business, we ran timed studies with raters, and we found that on average 40 questions takes about 20 minutes to complete. That's just the scoring, by the way. We're not talking about the comments. And that's without interruption. So roughly 2 minutes per question. And 20 minutes is a good target to aim for. So that's why, although the rule of 7 has a lot of value, I think in reality, 4 or 5 clusters of questions is usually enough. Any comments or suggestions or observations on that? I'm whistling through this at a fair old rate. Let me show you examples from the past. Now, I kid you not when I tell you that every one of these is drawn from our own client questionnaires. These are on our Enterprise Click 360 platforms or the Self-Drive platform. So this is where clients upload their own questionnaires. They don't ask us for any input. Now, I haven't made any of these up. What do you notice could be improved about any of them?
Everything.
Yeah. Double negative spelling.
Absolutely.
Number 3 is completely misspelled.
Negative.
We've got all of the things to avoid showing on this screen.
Yeah.
But there's more actually, because I wanted to show you, when I talked about context earlier, if I overlay onto this the way in which our survey questionnaire interface is headed, you'll see the name of the questionnaire, but then you'll see the person that you're rating. Now, if it's yourself, it'll be just that word, but if it's somebody else, their full name is appearing. So you need to think in context. Your question needs to sit right with that kind of heading, as well as the Likert scale. So if I move to what finished could look like, these are much better examples. And I think you'll agree these are much better. They're from, actually, nearly all of them are from our emotional intelligence question, EIQ. But that's the kind of question you want to be writing. If you can say it in less, less is more in this sense. Any questions or comments around that slide?
One of the things that that's been suggested to me when I've been researching is making sure that you do put in some negative questions, just to make sure that people don't fall into the oh, everything's rosy pink, and starts thinking about things from a wider perspective. What do you think about that, Colin?
It can be done. I've seen questionnaires from other platforms or on other platforms that do that. The challenge for us is that it wouldn't work with the way our answer set is displayed, because suddenly you'd be turning the scale around, and we don't have that facility. Our tool always goes from, if you like, negative to positive, left to right. So it would confuse the rater as to which way to score. So we don't do that. We don't recommend that. And I still maintain that we should be leading people towards what you want, not away from what you don't want.
Absolutely. Yes, my background is in positive psychology, so I'm with you on that.
Okay. No longer smokes is not a great statement. Enjoys the smell of the food or something like that is much better. Okay, so that's the pretty much the end, I think, of my formal presentation. We've done that one. Let's just take, sorry, I'm going backwards. There we go. That's where I want. I just want to flag up the next session next week, which is on awareness briefing. That one is actually being run by one of my coaches, so I'll be there, but I'm handing over the reins to a lady called Belinda Kiley, which I think Sue, you've met Belinda. But yeah, my next session features, I think, on probably the thing that is most important out of the setup of the 360. it's getting rater engagement, it's getting participant engagement, it's getting quality scores and comments. So that's next week. It's Wednesday. It's at 4 o'clock in the afternoon here, but I appreciate that'll be different times for some of you. So in summary, we are at 15:30. Are there any final questions or comments or suggestions that you would like to offer?
That's been really useful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It was a whistle-stop tour through Questionnaire Design, but I think what I want to leave you with is the fact that it's a perception survey. It's an opinion poll. It doesn't have to be too rigorous, but it still needs to make sense. And those rules, I think, are the ones to follow. So thanks very much, all of you, for participating. I'm reminding you there's 7 of these in total, 7 more of these in total. There's one every week. I know some of you have booked onto other ones as well. And if you haven't already booked, there is a link that I'll put into my follow-up email to each of you with the video recording link and the slide deck. So I wish you all a good rest of the week, and keep safe and well. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Bye.